Michael Moore is calling on Joe Biden to execute an unconstitutional bucket list before he leaves office. Polls show that Kamala Harris's lead over President Trump has vanished as Election Day draws closer. And a Trump supporter speaks out after being accused of plotting to kill the presidential nominee. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Monday, October 14th, and we're 22 days away from Election Day and figuring out who's finally going to run the White House in Washington, D.C. And I am joined by Stu Burguiere. He's the host of Stu Does America. Oh, but Matthew Peterson is still with us. He is the editor-in-chief of Blaze News. He is just in Washington, D.C. today. So, Peterson, let's start with you. Why aren't you sitting here next to me? Why do we have Stu here? What are you doing in D.C.?
Well, for the last 6 years, I've worked with the Claremont Institute. I used to run their fellowship programs, and these are programs for a lot of younger and mid-career people throughout the right, in everything from sheriffs to speechwriters. And so even though I work at Blaze, I still from time to time go and teach in those programs, and I like to listen to what everyone's saying. And so this weekend, I was with a lot of staffers and others who write speeches and other things throughout the right, spending time with them. And since I happened to be in D.C., I decided to make a visit with a lot of other people over the last few days to kind of take the pulse of what's going on here.
What's the farm system look like for conservatives right now, Matt?
So I will say this, I really think this is a good news and something that people back home should take to heart. I've been doing this for the last 6 years, and I will tell you that the average staffer for the politicians that you kind of like has gotten better, not worse, over time. The younger staffers on the right understand the base. They understand what's going on in the rest of the country better than a lot of the older politicians because, after all, they've experienced it and they're coming from the rest of the country. So I'm very impressed with the changes in rhetoric and the understanding of policy. The younger staffer on the right in D.C. now, they know how bad it is. And a lot of them, more often than not, they're actually on the side of the good guys here.
Well, Peterson, while we have you, I want to run through some of the news of the day because it's been a wild Monday already because we had Bill Clinton. He was out on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris, but you would think that he was campaigning for Donald Trump based on this soundbite. Let's take a look.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up, so we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work, there wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
He has a Harris Walls hat on his head, Matthew, but the words that are coming out of his mouth, we should be vetting the immigrants that are coming into this country. It doesn't really line up with what they're saying on the left.
First off, wow, it kind of pains me to see him so old and frail. But second, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on right now around the country. I mean, even Kamala's whole campaign is saying like, oh yeah, actually, we need a border wall now. So very interesting, almost as if the bottom is falling out.
I'm really shocked, too, even in his old age, that Bill Clinton's solution to the problem would be have more sex, which is, of course, where he went. It was fascinating to watch that because, of course, it's true, right? It's exactly the argument we've been making forever. There's nothing wrong with immigration per se. In fact, a lot of immigrants that come here are amazing citizens eventually, but they have to go through that process. They have to be clear, like an obvious baseline and the foundation of Donald Trump's strength on this issue, Matt. And I mean, I don't know if Bill Clinton, in his age, has just lost it and he's not putting that together. Why do you think he's going that direction?
I mean, I think he's just speaking from the heart and the best argument he knows, right? And that's what he believes, and so he's just gonna say it because it's obvious, and it's true, and his job is to talk about, make an argument, a case for her or a case for what should be, and he's not talking about what's actually happened and who's responsible for it. But by implication, you can figure that out fairly easily. This isn't a campaign based on truth, right? Or any kind of history.
It never has been. No. And you know what is also not based in truth? Anything that Kamala Harris is doing these days, because Chris Rufo posted on X earlier today that Kamala Harris was plagiarizing at least a dozen sections of her book called Smart on Crime, according to his new investigation. He said the current vice president has even lifted material from Wikipedia. Point number one, kids. Don't plagiarize anyway. But if you are going to plagiarize, choose somewhere other than Wikipedia. Matthew, how bad is this for her campaign right now?
I mean, I don't know what ghostwriter plagiarized from Wikipedia, but they'll be in trouble. And, we'll see. I mean, I'm curious what Stu thinks if this carries over into the Fox News thing. But this is par for the course. And what you see around town is cautious optimism on everyone on the right that, this thing is going the right way. And that if it goes the right way, I mean, of course, everyone here thinks they'll be in that administration, but I guarantee you if Trump wins, he's going to have a force, a lot more people who are a lot more on the ball, know what to expect, and are ready to go. And you can sense that cautious optimism around town just because of this kind of stuff.
I was reading the plagiarized parts of this, Matt, and it's funny because it's like 150 words that are exactly identical in the exact same order as other sources. And then at one point, she just added the word additional. So that made it her own, I think, which is amazing. I don't know. I mean, I feel like she will be asked about this by Bret Baier, which I think is interesting. I'm actually really surprised she's doing this Bret Baier interview. It strikes me as a legitimately terrible decision by the campaign. I mean, Bret is, a friendly guy, a real journalist, but I do think he'll press her on these things. I hope in some ways, I kind of hope that we get more of the approach that we've been seeing with Shannon Bream and Tim Walz recently, where she's been going after him on specific issues and pushing him and not letting him off the hook. I think if he can go down some of those roads on the flip-flops on the policy, that might be a little more productive. But there is something about like a plagiarism scandal, Matt. We've seen this before with Joe Biden, for example, that it just hits people. It's different than disagreements on policy. It's like profound unfairness. You're stealing someone else's work. And sometimes that really just disconnects with voters.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it's so common at this point, but I think it still has salience for the reason you mentioned. And in Kamala's case, it kind of puts the puts the pin on the problem, which is that now this is not someone who seems to have very deep thoughts on her own, and so I can see it. I can see it definitely. It's the kind of thing that some people gravitate towards and use as a symbol of the underlying problem, which is that she's incompetent. And I mean, it's obvious. And so, I think it has legs.
Well, while we are looking forward to the election, we do still, unfortunately, have a few months left with the Biden administration. And liberal pundits, including guys like we always know, Michael Moore, Keith Olbermanns of the world, they're now calling on Joe Biden to fulfill a 13-item bucket list of unconstitutional demands. What is that, you ask? Well, they want to empty death row. They want to end the death penalty. They want to cancel all student loan and medical debt. They want to stop sending weapons to Israel, and so on and so on. So, Matthew, one of the things that we keep saying is it's not only going to be up to November 5th, but the 2 months after November 5th or whatnot are going to be just as important. So how likely is it that they'll get at least some of these things on the list?
I mean, they're going to try. We'll see. I mean, I think that that period in between the election and January will be tumultuous, and they're gonna push as hard as they can. There's a lot of things, of course, that can be done to throw a wrench in that, and you do have a White House that's not fully functional. So, we'll see. But let me tell you this: if we lose, right? If Trump loses, you're going to see a kind of shattering of the right here. I mean, you're going to see a lot of younger people say, you know what, I think this is actually over. I mean, it's shocking to me how many people who are on the ball here actually agree with Elon Musk, especially, again, like younger players. They kind of get the situation and they see this as existential. And I think it is. So, if the right is in the position where they're going to try to cram all this stuff through and it's unconstitutional, hey, great, that's fine, because the good guys may be coming to the rescue shortly. We'll see.
It seems to me to just be a bizarre state. I think it's desperation. I don't know what it is exactly, because you have one situation where quite clearly there was a strategy put forward by the Harris campaign from the very beginning, which was to keep her out of these moments, to keep her off TV, to keep her hidden in the basement, right? The whole basement campaign thing was not just like a vision that conservatives came up with. I mean, it was multiple months of her doing no interviews at all. And suddenly, like last week, they just shifted the car into reverse and are now doing the exact opposite thing. That's not the actions of a confident campaign that thinks it's up by 8 points, right? And now you look at this situation with this wish list, it's like a coach who is like on the verge of being fired. Like, you're emptying the playbook. And it feels like that might be where they are. I don't know. I mean, I look at the data every day. I know you guys do as well. The data itself just tells me it's a very close race. It doesn't tell me she's in massive danger of losing. It tells me she could lose, she could win. It's a flip of a coin. I don't know if their internals are telling them something much more scary, but they are acting as if they have to change tactics dramatically to pull this thing off.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent the closeness does scare them, even if it was just close, right? As you get closer to the time, these are people who've been willing to do a lot of very unsavory things to stay in power. So they are freaking out. I think there is evidence that their internals are showing them something sort of disastrous. And this is what's so wild about it now. I mean, everyone's cautiously optimistic, right? But we know this can change in a week, because we've seen all kinds of insane things happen in this news cycle for the last however many years, and especially this summer up until now. So I think there's a lot of people, I think, like myself included, on pins and needles, thinking if this trajectory, keeps going, I mean, Trump seems to have a solid shot. But what is going to happen in the next few weeks? And then even if he does win, that's probably going to be projected out, right? They're not going to say, they're just going to concede. They're going to fight that. And then you're going to have all these other measures coming into place going in before Inauguration Day, because in the Washington, D.C. Borg mind, there is no category there for the possibility that Donald Trump could actually win and be president again. That does not compute. That must not happen.
Do you guys think there's anything to like this just Joe Biden old guy president theory, where he's pissed off about Kamala Harris taking his gig? He's got nothing left. The only thing he's really got left to do, the only reason he's still in office, I'm pretty sure, is just so he can pardon Hunter Biden once he gets past the election. Like, at this point, he's got nothing to lose. Why not go balls to the wall and just be like, I don't care. I'm going to pass as much crap as I can. A lot of it'll get overruled. Who cares? I'll just do it all by executive order, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. It's scary.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what does he want to do, right? I'm not sure, but it is very interesting, sure. Some of these signs and symbols we've seen recently where you do kind of feel like the guy's on his own side. So I would welcome that. I mean, I really enjoy watching this conflict within the Democratic Party. But I will see. I mean, I would imagine that we will see more from him. He's not all there, but he knows that these are his last moments. So I would expect something ridiculous, actually.
Yeah, Stu, I think it's cute that you have an idea that he can go out there and actually have any thoughts still remaining in his head right now. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. Safe travels back here, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
When we come back, Stu will be breaking down Kamala Harris's collapsing poll numbers up next. And if you watch this show, you know that you need to relax after a very long day. And what's better to do that than with your favorite glass of whiskey? And if it turns out that with every glass, you're helping to support a great American cause, doesn't it make it that much better? It's time to chart your own course with Flying Ace whiskeys from Craft Co. They're inspired by generations of American aviators and proudly made right here in the United States. And Flying Ace is making amazing whiskeys, and they're supported to supporting our troops and their families through their partnership with Folds of Honor. And they're providing scholarships of families of fallen or disabled. And these scholarships allow families to begin to chart their own new course after experiencing great sacrifice. Flying Ace whiskeys are American proud because they're American made. And they're American proud because they're helping to support our heroes and their families. So don't wait around. I was so thankful that Jason out there reached out and said that he went out and grabbed his own. And you can also go out there and see what the hype is all about. So go buy online at flyingacespirits.com. Use code America to get free shipping. It's flyingacespirits.com. Code America for free shipping.
The big headline, this is a national head-to-head poll, is that Vice President Kamala Harris had a 5-point lead in our last poll taken a month ago, right after the debate. That lead has all but evaporated, Willie. Take a look at this new head-to-head matchup. 48% to 48%. That is what we call a deadlocked race. It underscores what we all know, that this is tight, that the country is sharply divided. One of the other big headlines here, people are viewing the Trump presidency more favorably than the Biden presidency. Why is that significant? We've seen the vice president get pressed repeatedly on what she would do differently than President Biden, and she's really struggled with that answer.
There is a lot to unpack there, and Stu Burguiere does this every single day. And so we're going to put you on the spot now and do it here for Blaze News Tonight, because as she said, 48 to 48 in that latest poll that they saw, things are extremely tight. And you've said that you think that this is really, really close right now.
I do. I mean, and I think, you can always find a poll that you like for your candidate or one that you hate for your candidate. That's one of the reasons we came up with this idea for the pulse cast, which is like putting your finger on the pulse of all of it. The election models, the prediction markets, these polling averages, all the data, and looking at it so we can get kind of an idea as to what does it really look at. And there's a real narrative to the race since Kamala Harris got into it. She got into the race. Obviously, Trump was way ahead of Biden. She got into the race, got that nice media bump, got that afterglow of the announcement. Democrats getting excited. She sort of took a very slight lead. That started to fade. The boomlet was dead. It popped, came back down. And actually, in the Pulsecast, Donald Trump took the lead for the first time the day before the debate. And then the debate, she had another bump, for whatever reason. I didn't like her performance all that much. Some people, I guess, did. And she won a few votes and kind of took a little bit of a lead. Now that has now basically faded to zero. And we are, I want to say Trump was as low as maybe 42% to win in that measure of mainstream, political thoughts and data analysts. It's now up to, I think he's up to 48. So it's not even, it's almost unfair to call it a toss-up. It is legitimately, from that measure, completely up in the air. There are other things to look at, though, right? I mean, I was talking to Glenn, who did some traveling with Donald Trump in events. Glenn Beck, I'm sorry. Yes, I should mention that, even though most people on the Blaze are aware. But yes, Glenn Beck, he did events with Donald Trump over the weekend. And he was just like, the crowds were amazing, and they were so passionate, and they really cared, and they know about policy, and they know all this stuff. And I can't help but think there's some hollow feeling with the support of Harris. Like, it's one of those situations where, like, if you're in the middle and you're not like a hardcore leftist, which obviously you're going to support any Democrat, if you're in the middle, I think there's an element of like, finding, you're dating someone and then all of a sudden you got to make this decision to marry them. And then like, it doesn't sound quite as good. The bar lighting, she looked all right, but now I don't know. The church is well lit. I just feel like I don't know that there's a real passion for Kamala Harris. I think only there's passion against Trump. That might be enough. I mean, the data shows me it very well might be enough, but I'm a bit skeptical of the real solidness of her following.
Well, leave it to CNN to be the outlet that would actually bring us a major disadvantage for Kamala Harris. Let's take a listen.
All right. So party ID nationally. You go to October, November of 2016, Democrats had a 3-point advantage. You go 4 years ago, Democrats had a 6-point advantage. Look at where we are today, Manu. Republicans with a 1-point advantage. A very different picture, very much mirroring what we see in the party registration numbers in those key battleground states and Pennsylvania in particular.
And it actually just shows you, too, why Harris is doing what she's trying to do. She's trying to moderate a little bit on these issues, trying to reach those very voters, because the party registration is changing and the demographics of the voters are changing. Those are the people she needs to attract.
Absolutely. And you know, the GOP leads by a point in party identification right now. The average when the Republican Party loses is the Democrats ahead by 8. When the Republican Party wins, the average party ID advantage for Democrats is 3. Republicans right now, Manu, are doing even better than the average when they win. If there's one little nugget that I think Republicans are really hopeful for, it's this party ID and this party registration data. It really points in a good direction for them and for Donald Trump.
Wow.
Stu, and when I listen to that, I think back to what we were just talking about with Matthew Peterson, right? And you're like, why is she going on Fox News? Why was Barack Obama out there last week saying, hey, black men, we need to come out and vote for Kamala Harris? To me, it looks like if it's the internal polling that she sees, there's something there that she doesn't like, right? And you see all of these numbers come out, again, on CNN, not really a friendly news source. What do you make of all that?
And too, on CNN, Harry Anton's pretty good. Like, he's a good sometimes the data versions of these publications are a lot better than the than the news analysts.
Than the opinion side.
Yeah. Harry's pretty good, and he lays it out fairly. I think this is a major problem for them. It's not it's a 1-point lead. The Democrats always lead the generic ballot, though. They always are ahead, it seems. I think there was one race since 2000. I want to say it was 2004, where it was either tied or maybe the Republicans had a slight lead. And of course, Republicans wound up winning that election at the White House level. It's a situation where, it is very, very close. If you have a polling error going in either direction, you could see easily 300 electoral votes on either side. You could see House control for the Democrats. You could easily see that. You could also see a really nice win for Republicans in the Senate, where you're at maybe 54, 55 seats. It's all on the table here, which is what makes this so fascinating. I do think that there are a lot of these underlying measures that look pretty darn good for Republicans. Republicans have a way, an innate skill to blow these situations, to screw them up.
What?
I know this is shocking.
They do.
For so many,
this hasn't been my entire life, Stu.
I know. You go back and you look at the red wave of 2022, which was enough to at least stop Joe Biden's worst impulses with control of the House, but that was about it. And there were some complaints at the time that Republican polling outfits were flooding these polling averages with sort of cheap polls that look good for Republicans, which moved the polling averages to make people think it was going to be better for Republicans than it actually was. There's some evidence to that, and that may be, there's more Republican polls going on now. These polling averages, though, have kind of figured this out. They look at this and they say, we're only going to take higher quality polls and count them at the highest level. So all these people are trying to correct for these past errors. And this is the one thing that makes me a little nervous about this idea that there's going to be this polling error in the favor of Donald Trump. If that is true, Donald Trump will win easily. If there's a 3-point polling error toward Donald Trump, he's going to win easily. And the polling errors in the past 2 elections when he's run have been larger than that, significantly larger. That being said, these polling outfits try to correct for these things. They try to figure out, well, where did we go wrong last time? How do we correct that for next time? Because they want to be right. These campaigns come to them. They get a bunch of money when they're right. They want to be right on these things. Have they corrected that problem? If so, we are in a razor-thin race.
Well, I look at the internal memo for the Real Clear Politics, and it showed that President Trump is currently running 13 points ahead of where he finished in 2020 with independents. And to me, that's an astonishing number, because everybody knew who Donald Trump was when he ran in 2016. They clearly knew who he was in 2020, and he's actually gaining from where he was even back then. And just explain how difficult that is in politics to be on the stage for as long as he has to have better numbers right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Everyone knew who Donald Trump was in 2016. You're right about that, but they didn't know who he was as a president, right? They knew him as a TV star. They knew him as a real estate mogul. They knew a lot of things about him. I mean, he was one of the most famous people in the world before he became president. So people definitely knew about the guy.
Yeah.
That being said, it was still more of a situation, I think, in 2016 where they were like, look, we know Hillary Clinton. We know how she would be. We don't want her. Let's just go the other direction. I think that was a good chunk of the reason he won in 2016. In 2020, I mean, there's a way of looking at the 2020 election and saying, hey, like, we were in the middle of a global pandemic. Things were really ugly.
Yeah.
And he still almost won. I mean,
Yeah.
I think people looked at that and said, well, everything was pretty good until 2019. He probably would have won in 2020. The fact that he was that close, even with the pandemic and everything, is actually pretty significant. I think one thing, because you can look at these numbers across the board with minority voters, with younger voters, all these groups, independents, that look better for Donald Trump. And I think most of it is real. I think there has been an actual movement. And Republicans have tried for approximately 1 zillion years to get one black person to vote for them. So this is real progress. Like, good job, boys and girls. I mean, you're now only down by 41 points among black voters. The one thing I will say, though, that is a little worrisome from this, Jill, is that there is a trade going on. The reason why this race remains close is because Republicans are now attracting voters that are lower income, that are not as suburban, that are minority voters, that are voters, in groups that are not necessarily as reliable a voter. Mm-hmm. And that's great. You want them on your side. You do. You don't want that necessarily at the expense of some mom in the suburbs who votes every single time, or an older voter above 65, where Kamala Harris's numbers look a little bit better than they have in the past. If you trade those voters out, you're kind of creating, you're trading a reliable voter for an unreliable one that might not work out in the future. That being said, look, you want to attract as many voters as you can in as many groups as you can and make those groups competitive. So this is, generally speaking, a good thing with just that little bit of an asterisk.
I'm going to take all of the positivity out of there.
All right.
And we're going to move on because it's a Monday and there's a lot going on. But you know what? What I'm hearing is positive thoughts.
All good things.
All good
No
things.
possibility of bad things happening in this country,
All good
we promise.
things. You know what? When we come back, we're going to separate fact from fiction regarding the third Trump assassination attempt just ahead. Every time this is delivered at my door, it is the best day. GoodRanchers.com. You're choosing more than delicious American meat. You're choosing to support local farms and ranches in the United States and stand up for transparency and safety in our food supply. Good Ranchers partners exclusively with American farms to provide you the pasture-raised beef, chicken, pork, and wild-caught seafood that you can trust. And it's not going to have any of those antibiotics, the hormones, the seed oils that nobody ever wants in their food anyway. By shopping from GoodRanchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for: quality, hard work, dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is running their presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years, good until the next presidential election. And that means that when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you decide if you want the free chicken breast, Angus ground beef, apple smoked with bacon, or wild-caught salmon in your order for 4 years. And it's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. Personally, I love that they come vacuum sealed, so I decide how much I want on any given night. And it's less time prepping and more time enjoying. In a time when every dollar matters, Good Ranchers gives you the value without compromising on quality. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo worth up to $1,200 and bring 100% American meat to your family meals through 2028. It's GoodRanchers.com, code Jill. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. This past Saturday, Van Miller was arrested outside the Trump rally in Coachella, California, for allegedly posing an assassination threat to Donald Trump. Now, the Riverside County Sheriff claimed that Miller had 2 loaded firearms in his possession and multiple fake passes, including a VIP pass and a press pass. But in a 75-minute Rumble video, Miller denied that he posed any threat to Trump. So here to discuss is Jason Buttrill. He's the head researcher for the Glenn Beck program. So Jason, when we look at this quote unquote assassination attempt, it doesn't look like the others. Would we even count this? Does this really ring true as an assassination attempt?
Well, it sounds to me like a classic case of the California statute of inconveniently having a firearm. There is a Second Amendment in this country. That's what it appears to me. I think the guy came from Nevada, right? And it's not out of the realm of possibility at all for someone just to not to know that some reason when you pass that state line, all of a sudden your Second Amendment rights don't exist. With the first time I got a gun in the state of California, I was working in a private security company. And when you buy the gun at the gun store, it was required at that time for them to give you a pamphlet that said how to own a firearm in California and not go to jail. Seriously, I was like, where did I move to? This is absolutely insane. But that is the mentality in California, absolutely. And that would not surprise me at all if some overzealous, sheriff or whoever was just like, oh my gosh, it's an actual firearm, and freak out. No, I don't think this classifies as an assassination attempt. I don't think this classifies as much at all, really, just based off the facts as it is.
I used to live in Pennsylvania, and we had a house that was a block away from the river, and the river that separates Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And as a gun owner, I was terrified constantly that I would bring my gun to a range or whatever and leave it in my car and then drive across that river into New Jersey, because this happened to people.
Didn't this happen to one of your Philadelphia Eagles?
Probably, yes. I mean, they have many. Yeah. There's a lot of gun charges around my favorite team. There's no question about that. But it happens, right? Like you go into New Jersey and you can go to prison for months. And we talked to a woman years ago now who was on the verge of going to prison for years because of that type of thing. It's insanity. So I don't know if that's the case here. It definitely doesn't ring like the other assassination attempts, right? Like he seems to be a supporter. He seems to be someone who has no problem with Trump. Seems to be someone he's claiming, I guess these were real passes. Yeah. Who knows what the truth is?
We do have a soundbite of Miller. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what he had to say.
I don't know ever in the history of humankind where there's been an individual like me that's rolled up and said, I have 2 firearms in my trunk, clearly indicating that I'm not there to cause any problems. I'm not there for anything nefarious. But nonetheless, this police officer felt threatened when he's the one with the firearm right then and there. But I complied with him. I complied with him because my impression of most Trump rallies was that the police officers there were respectful of the Constitution and appreciated that I was upfront about the lawful firearms within my car.
So, Jason, is that in line with what you think it should sound like, at least, if he wasn't there to cause any harm?
What it sounds like to me. I mean, yeah, I think it's, if you have, he says multiple firearms, he probably had a pistol and a shotgun. I think that might've been what it was. I don't know. But in the state of California, that's a whole lot different than if I'm cruising around Fort Worth and a cop pulls me over and I'm like, oh yeah, I got a shotgun and a pistol in his trunk. And he's like, yeah, who doesn't? You know what I mean? So that's not out of the realm of possibility that the cop was just like, this just seems kind of weird because they're just not used to that over there. But yeah, this guy, there are multiple people were tweeting saying that, hey, we know about this one of the organizations that he's with. He's pro MAGA, he's pro Trump. This is not a profile of an assassination attempt in the slightest. Now, I don't know if circumstances were different. Let's say it was a rabid far left, person. If we did know that the passes that he was trying to pan off, as legitimate were not legitimate, and he did have, things might be different. But I'm not seeing that at all in this case. But again, I'm sure it's the situation is fiery, right? I mean, anywhere you go, even to play devil's advocate on the side of law enforcement, this is not a normal time. We are divided like we have never been divided, and more people are willing to go to those extremes. So, the police are on another level, I think, on making sure that it's not they're not the police department or the sheriff's department in these locations that dropped the ball, that, didn't listen to the warnings. And if anything, I hope they're learning from some of those mistakes, and they are. They just have to make sure that they're not overstepping, boundaries in some of these areas.
Well, Jason, I want to change topics because I'm looking at your shirt right now and it says Harley Davidson Jerusalem on it. And I know that you were just over there, and we've recently seen, I think it was 4 Israelis killed, 60 injured. Everything is just still escalating from October 7th last year. So what did you see while you were over there?
If you're in the West, if you're in the United States, how you view that horrific attack that's one of the worst terrorist attacks I've ever seen or heard about in modern history, maybe ever. The brutality, everything, just insane. And but that's how we see it, is, we class it as a terror attack. Well, they see it not only as that, but that was, more importantly, day one of the war. They see themselves, and I think as they should, as a country at war. And it involves, talked to multiple people about how, they captured documents inside Gaza after they went into Gaza, and also captured documents on some of the Hamas terrorists when they entered into Israel. And this was a multi-pronged attack. This was an attack that was supposed to come from Gaza. It was an attack that was supposed to come from Hezbollah in the north of Israel, come down that way. And it was supposed to coincide with an Iranian attack, missile attack, their proxies, other Arabs within Israel were supposed to rise up in places like the West Bank. This was a plan, very well thought out, but Hamas looks to be like they just jumped the ball. Like they jumped the gun. They jumped the gun. They just went off when they shouldn't have done it. And they should have waited.
That's interesting. They should try to coordinate their communications better. I have a beeper company they can work with. I think that would be helpful. Yeah, because they'll need that information.
They need new ones now.
They do.
So moneymaker over there.
But yeah, the beyond that, I was there for October 7th. So multiple different memorials were scheduled for that time, and it's just the impact hits you so much different. We heard stories. And you won't hear that, I think, from media. A lot of times I feel like they almost try to downplay it.
You went to the actual site of the music festival.
Yeah.
That must have been incredible.
That was, I mean, the figurative smell of death was still everywhere. So basically everywhere someone was gunned down, and there was, I think it was like around 300 people just in that location. They put up a placard of their the picture all around where they fell, and you can just walk through that, and you could walk through there for multiple minutes going in one direction. Photograph, young people, older people. It was insane. And you could tell by the way they were positioned, like you could see where the masses scattered after the original attack went off, or some went off in the directions they shouldn't have. Some went off in directions toward one of the bomb shelters that are all over, Israel. And then there were multiple pictures just, posted outside the bomb shelters where they got slaughtered inside death was everywhere. It's you cannot, being someone from the West, I think even people that have grown up in Israel didn't think that something like that could happen. But evil's a very real thing. And these countries, they want to destroy Israel. They want to. That is the plan. They still have the plan. It's going on right now. As you said, there was how many different?
4 dead, 60 wounded.
And that was today.
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. You don't hear about a lot of these attacks. A lot of the Western media will be in Tel Aviv. And after a while, you just don't listen to those, missile warnings. You just don't even listen to it. There'll be people training for decathlons and stuff on the beach. Or people just like suntanning on the beach. The security is so, effective around Tel Aviv that nothing ever really gets there. So you're kind of in a bubble. You're in actually a literal bubble right there. But rockets are constantly being fired from Hezbollah in the north, or Iran, or Yemen, all over the place. It's happening every single day. We just don't hear about it. It's not going to stop. And I'm telling you, when I say they see they're in a war, they're going to finish that war. And whether that means waiting until the next administration comes in, or gauging what happens, they're going to invade more into Lebanon. They're going to attack Iran. It's just going to happen.
So with that in mind, last question for you. Things continue to escalate. Nobody is out there really wanting to de-escalate worldwide, right? Just not even in just this region, but this is where the hotbed is right now. How close do you think that we are to a potential World War III scenario?
That's a tough one. So it all depends on alliances and who wants to make do on a lot of those alliances. So Iran has a relationship with Russia. We know they supply drones to Russia to use in Ukraine. I don't see it in Russia's interest, or say China's interest, to get too involved in something like this. Something that would break out into a more global conflict if, let's just say, Israel says, okay, we're striking the nuclear sites in Iran, we're striking their oil fields. That's kind of like the red light that goes off. We're like, okay, now we're in a wider regional war. What I would be most concerned about at that point would be Iran shutting down global oil production. So two straits, Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that goes down to the Suez Canal. That is one of their holy crap buttons that they can push to send the entire world upside down. Now, if we say, even if it's Trump is president at the time, and he wants to keep us out of that, which he could say, we're not going to attack Iran. We're just going to defend Israel if Israel's like, barraged or whatever, or overwhelmed. He won't be able to not respond. We won't be able to. He'll have to respond if they close those two straits down, and we're in it. And then we'll see how far it goes.
Jason, last one from me. I keep hearing this, that our administration is saying they will not back Israel if they hit the their oil production facilities or their nuclear facilities. I get the oil one, right? Like, you're talking about a global oil price that could go up. You can even justify and say, well, they need oil. There's some humanitarian concerns or whatever there. Why would we care if Israel hit their nuclear facilities? Why wouldn't that should be the number one place they should be aiming?
Yeah. I don't really have an answer for that. I don't get that at all, because that seems like that would be a prime target unless they're worried that it would not be a successful attack. Because if you go towards, like, let's say they have a huge facility in Natanz, Iran. If you fail to take out the facility in Natanz, Iran, how many more facilities, or even from that one facility, could they use to retaliate and strike back? That could send a whole lot of chaos and a whole lot.
We don't think that they have nuclear weapons yet, right? We don't think.
They got the material for it. So yeah, it just depends on how much missile technology they've received from North Korea, which that is a thing. They have been working together on that. How much missile technology have they received from North Korea, and do they actually have a deliverable weapon, which is another thing. But I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. Just wouldn't.
Let's hope they never get there. Jason Buttrill, thanks so much.
You bet.
When we come back, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are unlikely to wish you a happy Columbus Day. We have the videos to prove it. Next.
So I'm wondering, would you support efforts on a federal level to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day? And why does that matter so much?
Sure. Yeah. And why it matters is, to your very point, we have to remember history. And this question, I think, really is connected to the last question about our morals and our compass and our goals and our aspirations. We have to remember our history. Uncomfortable, to your point about truths, though it may make us.
Stu, I love watching that clip for several reasons, but Kamala Harris usually has a problem speaking, but now she's like, oh, Columbus Day, when we should call it Indigenous People Day? I have that answer for you ready right here.
Oh,
and I mean, would she actually try to make this a priority of her administration to change the name?
It's so impossibly stupid that yes, I think the answer is probably yes. I think there's a certain amount of things that Kamala Harris actually knows and cares about. Like, I could talk Philadelphia Eagles with you all day, right? Like, you start talking to me about some boring policy I don't actually care about. I might be able to get through a sentence or two about it, but honestly, at the end of the day, I don't care. She knows and cares about this type of issue, right? She is in the pocket. I mean, look, she grew up not a child of Oakland, but a child of Berkeley, and then went to Canada, and then went to, what was it? I can't remember this. One of the historically black colleges. I can't remember which one. Howard? Was it Howard? I think it was Howard. Anyway, like, she didn't grow up in an area that was short on people complaining about race from the far left, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is what she knows.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that she knows very well. And the other one you really notice it is abortion. Like, she doesn't feel uncomfortable talking about that type of an issue because she really feels passionately about making sure babies aren't born. Like, it's really like one of her big things. So when she tries to talk about, like, the border, she looks like an idiot because obviously she doesn't want to secure the border.
She's the border czar.
I know, but she doesn't want to secure the border. It's going to shock people who watch any commercials for her here in Texas where they constantly say over and over again that she wants to be tough on the border. She's going to prosecute criminals. No one believes that in the real world, but they're trying to win over people who don't pay attention. And I think her speaking about those issues off the cuff will convince no one, but they can kind of push this thing out there in ads where maybe it'll move some people.
Now, Stu, I'm convinced that there was a Donald Trump tweet for everything, and there is also a Tim Walz video for everything. Let's go look back in 2020 when Tim Walz defended rioters who tore down a statue of Christopher Columbus. Watch.
It was an act of civil disobedience that we need to make sure people feel that there is a proper outlet to address what are legitimate concerns around what they view as a genocidal monument that they have to walk to in their democracy.
They're two peas in a pod. But is this the America that you want to live in?
Again, if you watch the video of Tim Walz trying to load a gun and then see how easily he addresses that issue, you know exactly how far to the left he is.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, fakes as a moderate and then in reality is far, far to the left. Glenn Beck pointed this out today on radio, where he said, Tim Walz trying to load a gun is like he's as much a gun owner as Dylan Mulvaney is a little girl. And I think there's something to be said for that. But that moment, you see confidence.
Harsh, but true.
Yes. This is a person who's confident about saying that it's okay to tear down the statues and memorials in this country.
But when I look at it, didn't he bring diversity to America? Yes. Isn't he an immigrant that just came over here? Isn't he the exact person that the, Harris administration would be telling us, oh no, we need to let them in and accept them? But it just happened too early in the calendar, so they decided, oh, we don't like him.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we do that, right? Like for a long time, Irish people were immigrants and like the villains of people who didn't like immigration in this country, illegal or illegal. And now, like, they separate these groups in such different ways. Like, I mean, I come from an Italian. My mom was Italian. Like, you go back and look. My dad comes from a Swedish line of hereditary features, I suppose. But you go back and you look at that, and you're like, well, why are Italians now just Americans? Like, they are. You look at. I talk to friends of mine who are Hispanic and work in politics, and they're like, I don't understand it. Why is the Hispanic vote a thing? I'm Cuban, and these people are from Honduras. We share nothing in common, but we're grouped into the Hispanic vote categories. A lot of this stuff makes absolutely no sense, which should not surprise you considering we're talking about politics.
Identity politics on the left will never make any sense. And I don't think overall, I mean, if you're out there and you're the normies, I don't think that they really care about Columbus Day. They care if their stores and banks and post office are open. But beyond that, I don't think that it really has much of effect on anybody's life. But Stu, hey, thanks for filling in today.
This was fun.
It's so fun having you. And we always have to break down the polls. And again, I'm going to take all of the positivity out of it because we have 22 days left. And that's still a very long time in the general scheme
Let
of
me
things.
leave you with this. Donald Trump will win all 50 states.
There we go.
538-0.
Landslide, even better than Ronald Reagan. You heard it here from Stu Burguiere. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back to break it all down tomorrow night.